In females, the reproductive period, or fertility period, refers to the years of monthly menstrual cycles between the first menstrual period, which happens at puberty, and then the permanent stopping of menstrual cycles, which is called menopause. Menopause usually sets in around 50, and is preceded by a couple of years of hormonal and physical changes, and this is called perimenopause. To be more specific, a woman's entered menopause when an entire year has passed since her last menstrual period. During the reproductive period, the ovaries have basically got a ton of ovarian follicles scattered inside of them. And each ovarian follicle is made up of a ring of granulosa and theca cells surrounding a primary oocyte at the core. And during each menstrual cycle, one of these follicles ruptures at ovulation, and it releases the oocyte out into the fallopian tube, where it can be fertilised by a sperm, or it can just carry on down its path and you don't get pregnant. So the weird thing is that even though females are born with millions of follicles, only about 400 of them actually mature enough to release their oocyte throughout the lifetime. So if ever you're feeling useless, just think of those ones that have gone to waste, hey? Anyway, all of this process is ultimately controlled by the hypothalamus, which is all the way away from the gonads up in the brain. And the hypothalamus secretes gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH, which travels to the nearby pituitary gland and makes it secrete two hormones of its own: follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, or LH. FSH and LH then act on the ovarian follicles. So the theca cells respond to LH by producing progesterone, and the granulosa cells respond to FSH by making estradiol, which is a member of the estrogen family. The menstrual cycle on average lasts about 28 days. And for the first 2 weeks, estrogen sends a negative feedback signal to the pituitary, which inhibits the production of FSH. And likewise, during the second 2 weeks, progesterone inhibits LH production. So hormone levels are basically constantly being regulated, and this leads to a cyclic and predictable pattern in hormone secretion during the reproductive period. So, during each menstrual cycle, a couple of follicles are stimulated by FSH and LH, until one of them, the victor, emerges as the dominant follicle, and ruptures at ovulation. And the rest of them, well, is pretty bleak really, they just degenerate off and die. Over time, many ovarian follicles degenerate, and the ones that remain become less and less sensitive to FSH and LH. This goes on until menopause, when there are no remaining follicles that respond to gonadotropins, and that causes the menstrual cycle to cease entirely. Now, a couple of years before menopause, the woman enters a transition period called perimenopause. And during perimenopause, the ovaries have far fewer functional follicles, so the menstrual cycles preceding menopause are often anovulatory. Anovulatory means without ovulation, and that's because none of the follicles are responsive enough to FSH and LH stimulation in order to mature and release the oocyte at ovulation. The lack of ovulation can cause missed or irregular periods, and they become more and more irregular and more infrequent as the ovarian follicles start to run out even more. And fewer follicles also means less estrogen and progesterone, so less inhibition on the hypothalamus and pituitary. And in turn, the hypothalamus and pituitary produce more frequent, larger bursts of GnRH, FSH, and LH. The difference is, though, that the pattern of secretion is much more erratic than during the reproductive period. This erraticness, along with decreasing estrogen levels, can cause a bunch of problems, and these include hot flashes and night sweats, which can lead to trouble sleeping, and also vaginal dryness, which can lead to dyspareunia, which is pain during sex. Also, estrogen normally has a protective effect on both the cardiovascular system, where it helps to keep the blood vessel walls nice and flexible to accommodate blood flow, as well as the skeleton, where it helps to sustain bone density. So low levels of estrogen can also lead to complications, like cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is decreased bone density, which increases the risk of bone fractures. Now, changes in hormone levels can also impact mood, so women going through menopause may experience irritability or mood swings. So, even though the transitioning into menopause is a natural step in the ageing of the female reproductive system, these symptoms can really have quite a negative impact on overall well-being. The good news, though, is that the body can adjust to the hormone changes, so they actually go away after a couple of years on their own. But in the meantime, there are tons of ways that we can alleviate them. For hot flashes and night sweats, it's really useful to avoid triggers like hot drinks and spicy foods, as well as just maintaining a cool ambient temperature. That can really help reduce these symptoms. For vaginal dryness, there are things like vaginal estrogen creams and lubricants that can be used during sex to help with the pain. And in an attempt to prevent osteoporosis, vitamin D supplements can be used. And in some cases, hormone replacement therapy could be used as well.